Maverick News. The world is watching. In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Well, I'd like to shift the focus a little bit to Canada because I know you've got roots in Canada. Let's talk about, there's a lot going on. It was a very eventful week. Of course, Tucker Carlson invaded like he's been promising to do for quite some time. He came to Canada this week, and I think Rick has a little sample clip of one of his speeches, but your brother went or didn't go to the speech in Edmonton this week?
I wanted him to go to the Edmonton speech. He seemed excited about Tucker in Alberta, but I haven't confirmed yet if he actually went. My brother's in northern Alberta, and if you consider the weather up there, it might be. I think it's a 3-hour drive from Cold Lake to Edmonton. But he was excited about Tucker. He actually sent me a picture on my Signal. I woke up in the morning to see a picture. He says right-wing extremists, and there was a Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta,
Premier of Alberta.
Lord Conrad Black, Jordan Peterson, and Tucker in the middle of that. So wow, pretty cool looking photo. Great. So he was excited. He was excited that he was there. That's for sure.
Yeah. So here I have this clip of Tucker
let's
Carlson,
take a look.
And he kind of calls out Canada's Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, serving in 2 roles, Chrystia Freeland, who
good.
I'm sure you'll have a lot to talk about.
Bring it on
here.
Give it to me.
Yes, is now facing a far slyer opponent, which is the feminine expression of fascism, the Chrystia Freeland version of fascism. Yes.
Bravo.
And I know a lot about this because I knew Chrystia Freeland when she, was a journalist at the Financial Times, whose name shall forever live in infamy for employing her. And I remember even then thinking, this woman is not bright at all. But boy, does she have high self-esteem. I don't think I've ever even seen it's off this. I don't know what the self-esteem measurement scale is, the Richter scale. But her self-esteem was literally unassailable. It was bomb-proof. If a nuclear bomb dropped on your town, you could hide beneath Chrystia Freeland's self-esteem and live. There's like nothing you could do to shake it. Nothing. No amount of evidence of her stupidity and wrong decisions and idiotic views could dissuade her from the core belief that she was awesome and you were not. And I kind of stood back in admiration. So I guess I shouldn't be totally shocked that she's helping to run and destroy your country. But she's doing it in her signature way. She's not getting on the CBC, her media outlet, which like almost all outlets in this wonderful oppressed country is run by the government. It's all state media. It's Albania 1985. And I'm sure we have people whose families were refugees from Albania. Welcome. And you know what I'm talking about. But at least you could say of the Albanian leader in 1985, Enver Hoxha, that when he went full fascist, he just didn't mince words. Shut up and obey or we'll shoot you. Chrystia Freeland is wise enough, clever enough, in her serpent-like way, to make it all about your protection and safety. All about your protection and safety. No, we're just trying to help you. That's why you're in shackles. You're being arrested right now.
Savage.
Oh, it's for the common good. Don't worry, you'll understand. I always want to say, Mrs. Freeland, can I go to the bathroom? No, you can't. And you can just imagine her taking great glee as your 4th grade self wet his pants in class as Mrs. Freeland refuses to let you go to the bathroom.
That was epic.
It's brilliant. Yeah. I love it. And, it caused quite a stir, as you might imagine, with the Liberals. Their reaction was absolutely priceless.
Well, here, let me share a little bit of that with you. I've got a very brief clip with Stephen Guilbeault, the Minister of Climate Change and Environment.
Yeah, great minds think alike. I think I brought the same clip. Let's see if we brought the same one.
Here we go.
Oh yeah.
And Minister Trudeau, I mean, you're the minister that, as your colleague is saying, was targeted. I mean, how do you feel about
I mean, this goes beyond me and the fact that I was targeted last night at this event. This increases political violence against everyone who runs for office in this country, whether they're doing it at the municipal level, at the provincial level, or at the federal level. As my friend and colleague Randy said, like, we can have differences of opinion. We can bang our fist on the table when we meet. We can have strong disagreement, but to incite violence against people who disagree with you, that's not how things should be done in Canada.
Can you clarify what is the
No, we'll just arrest you.
What is the violence? I think the minister also said this in French. What is the violence that they're bringing to Canada? What is the political violence that you're talking about? Just to be very clear.
Well, to put a target on someone's back, for example, to name
And what is the evil?
to put
what is
someone
the
in
evil that you
crosshairs.
say they're- And Minister.
Yeah, and then she went on and said, so what should we do? Should we have had Tucker Carlson arrested? Blah, 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 blah. If I remember right after that, the journalist, it's funny, them talking about political violence. And what do? They arrest journalists like, like David Menzies from Rebel News. They freeze people's bank accounts when they protest. Go ahead, Mike.
And they beat the crap out of the truckers in Ottawa,
right,
too.
Yeah.
It's a travesty when you consider that even the highest court in Canada came down with the ruling that the Emergency Act was unconstitutional. Let's start
Just
with that.
this week.
The guy with the beard was looking like a alcoholic version of Robert Downey Jr. standing beside him. And that guy, who's apparently the Minister of Climate, whatever, looks like the typical guy who would go and rat to the teacher on you when they find you in high school smoking with your friends outside the garbage dumpster. Typical guy like that, So no respect, forget about it. But I mean, it's a clown show. But I was actually pretty surprised to find out that the journalists were asking intelligent questions. I mean, how is he, what is the violence that Tucker Carlson represents to you? Oh, he's putting a target on my back. I mean, what the hell is that? It's a clown show. But yeah, it's one of those miracles, I think, that happens in Canada. I know that they're appealing it, but that Emergency Act ruling that came down from the High Court, that was pretty surprising. And I think
little good news for a change.
Yeah, a little good news in Canada for sure, because it openly says basically you were oppressing your political opponents, literally oppressing them. So
yeah, an absolute violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I said that from the beginning. I said Canada died the day that he invoked the EA because the government literally went to war with its own people.
I think one of the most important issues, I may just say something on this point again, is what Maxime Bernier has been, because you're having an election coming up in Canada, right, soon.
Yes.
And Maxime, he they call him Mad Max. He's been at the forefront of fighting all this. I mean, he was arrested himself. I think it's very important to all our Canadian listeners, and I know there's a lot of you out there, good Canadian patriots. I talk to you sometimes. I understand you want to get rid of Trudeau. Very important. We've all tired of him. But make sure that you don't fall for the fake conservatives who are doing the exact same thing and towing the line during COVID, during Ukraine. Make sure to be very careful who you vote for, because Pierre Poilievre right now is trying to make himself out to be this anti-vax, anti-COVID hero who stood up for the rights and freedoms of Canadians. Total BS, and it can be easily documented. That's why I highly recommend to follow Maxime Bernier on Twitter. This isn't an election ad, by the way. But Maxime is pointing this out, and I think he deserves to be pointing this out because he was out there doing the Lord's work, doing the right thing.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. The PPC has its own challenges, but I'm just wondering, how much did they pay for that?
I'm sorry, I only get paid in Russian rubles.
Yeah. Well, Maxime Bernier has been on this program before, and I totally understand where you're coming from, and it doesn't take much to connect another dot from Ukraine to Israel to Washington to Canada. All of this stuff is intertwined.
I mean, at some point during the Ukrainian crisis, you could be seeing that Canada was even more fanatical in its support of Kiev than the United States. I mean, it's not surprising with Chrystia Freeland in the government, but they were, outdoing themselves literally. I mean, they wanted
including
to give
Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Some opposition. They all agree with each other 100%, at least on that.
if you consider the power of the Ukrainian lobby in Canada, it's much more powerful than the Ukrainian lobby in the United States. So that explains a lot. Follow the money and the influence.
That's right.
And let's not forget the famous Nazi in the Canadian Parliament, for God's sakes.
Yeah, that happened too since we last saw each other.
Highlights of the last year, exactly. Yeah.
Well, another thing that happened this week, which I just find as an American shocking, and I wanted to ask your thoughts on it, because you come from, the darker chapters of history in Poland, is what happened to Dr. Jordan Peterson this week, and sort of the re-education camp that he's going to be, re-education center that he's going to be forced into if he wants to keep his medical license. Take a look at this.
Controversy in Canada. An Ontario court ruling that Jordan Peterson can be forced to attend social media training demanded by the Ontario College of Psychologists over his past post criticizing gender ideology and climate change.
So if he refuses to comply, he loses his license to practice clinical psychology. But Jordan Peterson says his fight is not over.
And joining us right now from Ontario, Jordan Peterson. Jordan, they say you want to keep your license, you got to do it, but you say you're not going to do it. How's this going to end?
No, I didn't say I wouldn't do it. I did say that I don't believe that it'll help.
Okay.
I'm in their hands at the moment, fundamentally, because they've already sentenced me, so to speak, to an indefinite period of social media retraining with some social media expert, whatever the hell that is. And so I'm obliged to undertake that training at my own expense for an indefinite period of time until they, in their wisdom, presume that I've learned whatever it is that I'm supposed to learn, which, given my nature, strikes me as highly unlikely.
Jordan, what's the goal here? I mean, are they trying to...
The goal is to take my license.
Yeah, but are they trying to send a larger message, not to you, but your followers as well?
No, they're trying to send a larger message to me, my followers, and every professional of any sort in a regulated profession in Canada. And the message is, you do exactly what the low-level, mid-wit bureaucrats tell you, or you will lose your livelihood. That's the message. And it's crystal clear.
Dr. Peterson, I mean, does everyone who needs to continue their license have to do this, or are they just cherry picking you? And why do you say it's indefinitely? You have to continue to take these courses until they decide you've learned your lesson?
Yes, that's part and parcel of the whole deal. Yes. And no, I wouldn't say they're precisely cherry picking me. I suppose in a sense they are, because I'm the most well-known voice among professionals who dissent from the whatever ideology I'm supposed to be following. I dissent from that most egregiously, let's say. And so they're definitely making an example of me. And it's quite an effective example in some ways, because I have the time and resources to fight this battle, and I'm not dependent on my license for my financial stability and the support of my family. It's an extraordinarily expensive and time-consuming battle. And it's definitely the case that the goal is to take my license, because what they'll claim after dragging me through whatever this re-education is going to be, that, I can't be taught, that I'm ungovernable. That'll be the final. Is a disgrace to his profession, and he's ungovernable.
Well, when it all resolves itself, we'd love to have you back.
Is this similar to what's happening here in America? They're doing this with Republicans, Donald Trump?
Well, it's similar to, I would say, cancel culture in general, and it's similar to all the attempts to stop people who have an alternative viewpoint, which wouldn't have been alternative at all like 10 years ago, from expressing themselves by any means possible for the good of humanity and the planet. So Jordan, it's part of a much broader pattern.
Yeah, so we heard about the new online college that you guys and your academy that you plan on launching. Tell us about the work you and your daughter plan on launching.
Well, I've thought for a long time that the university systems, the systems of higher education in the West in general, are corrupt beyond redemption and also extraordinarily expensive and time consuming. And I've wanted to do something about that for many, many years. And we put together an online university project. We have about 30 professors, and they're very, very good professors. I've been privileged to meet some of the most intelligent and informed people in the world. We brought them down to Miami and filmed them producing 8-hour lectures, which are very, very well produced and accompanied by appropriate illustrations. And we'll launch that. We're going to soft launch that at the end of February to a limited number of initial subscribers. And we hope to knock the cost of a general course of higher education of various lengths. We're going to offer 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and 4 year certificates. We hope to drop the price by 95% and to provide the participants, the students, with a high quality social opportunities as well, because we know that university is in part a social enterprise as well as an educational enterprise. We'll have the best courses there are, taught by the best professors there are. And it'll be very inexpensive, widely available, translated into multiple languages eventually. And that's the plan, to put out some competition for the increasingly idiot universities. And you can see what they're like merely by contemplating what happened in Washington, D.C., when the presidents of MIT, Harvard, and UPenn made an absolute shambles of themselves and their institutions. And if you think that that was just a consequence of them and not indication of an unbelievable deep rot, well, you're blind, because the universities are very corrupt.
Well, thank you, Jordan Peterson, for joining us from Canada, talking about the new, essentially the new college you're starting online at the end of the month. Once again, if people want more information, it's petersonacademy.com. Doctor, thank you very much for making a house call.
Hey, good to see you guys. Thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome. Good luck. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
And I'm Rick Walker, and you're Mike Krupa.
Hey, how you doing? Literally. That's $5. Yeah, interesting. I remember when I think Pat Buchanan referred to Canada once. I'm not sure if it was in the context of Iraq or some other issue called, Soviet Canuckistan was the term that he used. I remember it because I was in high school then, and somebody was using it as a term of derision to say, oh, those bad Americans are calling us Soviet Canuckistan. And at that time, during the Jean Chrétien years, I mean, I could say, wow, what a different country that was than it is right now. But I think it's it's a travesty. On the other hand, it sort of dovetails nicely with a lot of these videos that I'm seeing on YouTube where Canadians are saying, why I'm leaving Canada, why I'm leaving Canada. The amount of films, why I'm leaving Canada on YouTube is just growing by the day. So that's one of the reasons. I mean, woke culture is exploding. And Peterson is, I guess, the most exemplary element of that. And yeah, I hope he makes it.
Can I just get you to comment a little more on that? You're seeing a lot of videos in Poland about Canadians saying they want to leave Canada.
Yep, it's on YouTube. Anybody can see them. I think some of them are Rumble, but I've seen at least 3 that were very deep dive in their messaging in terms of, the inflation, the woke culture, and so on, of literal Canadians born in Canada who are saying, don't come to Canada, and I'm leaving Canada. So
that's interesting. Have you been seeing a lot of videos about the activities of truckers and convoy activity in, say, like the last week or so as well? About,
I only saw that interview with that trucker who now lives in northern New York with Tucker Carlson, one of the main organizers, who was talking about the Coots 4. But other than that, I haven't seen anything that's happening behind the scenes on that.
I see. Okay, just curious because I just kind of want to know what's going on the ground there in Poland, especially with you had that. There was a truckers' blockade or strike of some kind in Poland. Can you talk about that and bring us up to date?
Yeah, well, there was a truckers' blockade which started, I think, somewhere in the fall. What happened was the Polish truckers were protesting against the fact that Ukrainian products were coming into the EU, and Ukrainian truckers could transport these products in the EU without special permits that they would have to get before. And they were coming in without duties, basically, into the European Union. So they were transporting these products at a much, basically at dumping price levels in comparison to the Polish trucking companies. So the Polish truckers said, we're going to go out of business. It's not fair that Ukrainians are not in the EU, but they're giving special EU privileges. We can't compete with that because they're always going to be cheaper. So what happened was they blocked basically all the border crossings between Poland and Ukraine. There were a couple of scuffles going on. The police tried to liquidate them, but there was just too many truckers. There were on-the-ground reports at that time where the people were filming what kind of things are going into Ukraine, for example, from the European Union. And it wasn't military equipment or humanitarian equipment, because the truckers explicitly said that we're not blocking any of the humanitarian or military equipment going into Ukraine. Although I personally thought they should have blocked the military equipment, but that's a different story. But they said we're not blocking military equipment or humanitarian equipment. We're just blocking everything else. Plus, we're very angry at the fact that they are allowed to come into the European Union. So some of the things that were on these trucks going into Ukraine, for example, like, new Mercedes S-Class, there was a sailboat going into Ukraine, motorboats. So things that, are mostly associated with people who make millions and like to have a luxurious lifestyle. Pretty interesting for a country that apparently is experiencing a war of extermination and genocide from the Russians. You would think those products would be going the other way to the West and not into Ukraine. But so there was some reporting going on about that. Now, those blockades have subsided, but because there's a huge issue right now of cheap Ukrainian grain, which continues to go into Poland. They call it experimental grain, which basically is, filled with chemicals. It shouldn't be made into bread and other products. And it shouldn't be on the Polish market. It should be dumped on the Polish market. So the farmers are protesting against that will kill their business also. And they want this Ukrainian grain out of Poland. So yesterday, there were huge blockades in several Polish cities. Highways were blocked, roads were blocked, and it was a sort of it was a cautionary strike, as they said, because they were also in part protesting against the European Union's Green New Deal. And because these protests, and they were fairly big, were so widespread, even the current Deputy Minister of Agriculture was forced to come and attend this protest in solidarity, by the way, not to discuss government farmers talking about how do we resolve this, but he said, no, I'm with you guys. I'm in solidarity with you guys, because what the European Union is doing is insane. Well, that's interesting in and of itself, because if you consider that the current government is very pro-EU, and I happen to know we contacted each other a few years back, the current Deputy Minister of Agriculture. It's interesting how long Donald Tusk is going to tolerate a member of his government making such inflammatory anti-EU statements, because he said the Green New Deal is going to destroy Polish agriculture. It's pretty hardcore. So we'll see what happens. But he did make those statements. He did join the farmers yesterday. And yeah, they're taking place. And the farmers are sort of combining their efforts with the huge farmers' protests in the West and Holland, especially in Germany, I'm pretty sure our listeners are aware of. There's also farmers' strikes taking part in Slovakia, in Hungary. Apparently, the Czechs are looking into joining. So this is the beginning of a farmers' movement that has had enough of the EU insane climate policy, which is killing the industry. Plus, in Poland, the issue of things being dumped on the Polish market, agricultural products, especially grain, from Ukraine with no consequences and literally at dumping price levels. So that's sort of the crux of the issue. And I think we're just starting to see the beginning of a wider movement in this regard.
Yeah, not to discredit, what anybody is saying about these protests happening in all these different countries. But what I have seen on social media, and that's why I asked you about seeing these videos about why I'm leaving Canada. Yeah. I've not seen any of that here at all.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.